The latest tech.
People love iPhone, and it's an important part of our daily lives.
Interviews.
You see far too many products that come on the market that you look at that you say, was a blind person ever even consulted for something like this?
Accessibility.
The most interesting thing over the last couple of years is the emphasis on gaming and accessibility.
This is Double Tap TV.
Hey everybody, it is Double Tap TV and I'm Steven Scott.
And I am Marc Aflalo, and Steven, this week we're going to tackle a topic that I think people will look at us going, how on earth did you manage to work that into accessibility and technology? Because you know what, we've always joked about doing reviews of cars, right, on this show, given that, you know, technology and mobility, they kind of intersect. You know, you look at how tech-filled Teslas are, electric vehicles. But I think we might have found the perfect angle to actually tackle that this week.
Yeah, and why not, right? Look, there's a kind of myth out there, and it's like a lot of things in life when it comes to blindness especially, that, you know, like a car, why would a blind person care about a car? You know, blind people are only interested in buses and trains, right? No, absolute garbage. You know, at the end of the day, a car is a car. It's exciting, it's fun. And you know what? Some of us have partners who are fully sighted. Now, I don't, but some people do. And if you do, you may well go out and buy a car. In fact, I am the owner of a car. I buy a car for my mother. She has a car and it's in my name. I never drive it, but I am in it fairly regularly, and that's nice. But I get the choice of, you know, of what to pick and what to choose. Obviously, she's driving it, so she gets a bit more of a say in some of the areas. But, you know, what's great is I get to get into the car in the showroom and play with all the toys, which is the bit I'm interested in. And, you know, we're seeing huge strides forward, and even some of the in-car entertainment becoming more accessible. So even someone like me could enjoy, you know, Apple CarPlay, for example, and, you know, have a really accessible experience with that. So this is the kind of thing that makes us interested in it. Again, this idea, and what I love doing with this show is trying to dispel the myths around blindness. And one of them is that we just don't care about these things because we can't use them, we can't benefit from them. Of course we can. Of course we do.
Now, we've talked about this before, but there's the holy grail idea here of autonomous vehicles that could one day in our lifetime give you the ability to own a car that's sitting in your driveway that takes you places by your voice or by entering a command and saying, just take me here. Do you think we're going to see that in our lifetime?
Well, I do, but I don't think it'll be in that way. I think what's likely to happen is that, you know, of all the years that have gone by that I have wished to own a car, I think that dream may come true. I think I will be able to have a vehicle and get in it on my own, which is really what I'm looking for, just a way of travelling on my own. I was talking to someone about this the other day. You know, when you're blind or when you don't drive, you have to always deal with other people. Think about it. If you're on a train, if you're on a bus, if you get a taxi, you're pretty much always around other people. And unless you can cycle, you know, on your own with a bike, there's really no other way of travelling on your own. And that's can actually get a little bit irritating. And that's one thing I love about a car, especially a driverless car. I can get in that vehicle on my own. I can turn the music up. I can sing badly along with whatever radio station is playing. I can, you know, just sit there and chill listening to a news article or whatever it is. I can just be on my own. I can have some alone time. But the bit that is kind of funny is that even though all this technology is coming to the point and all the legislation is getting to the stage where, yes, that may well be possible, we probably won't have the ability to buy cars. We'll essentially subscribe to vehicles. I think that's what's going to happen. I think the idea of car ownership in 15, 20 years will be laughed at by people. You know, the next generation will say, why were people buying cars? Cars that just sit in driveways all day, as opposed to, why don't we just use these cars and let them drive around and be useful? And that means reduce the amount of vehicles we have on our roads. And I think that's where we will end up. I personally don't care. I just want a driverless car.
You know, there's a really important practical element here, too, which is we're hearing more and more stories these days of people with disabilities being refused rides in Ubers and taxis. And, you know, those are unfortunate situations that if we had a solution like this, wouldn't exist. If you could subscribe to a car or summon an autonomous vehicle when you need it, then we'd reduce the human element that really has caused quite a barrier for some people to just get around a basic necessity.
It is exhausting, Mark, when you face this. I mean, I don't have a guide dog, my wife does, and she has faced a number of situations where she has been refused entry to a taxi. And it is exhausting. You know, if you are out on a night out and you call a cab company and you tell them you have a guide dog, and then the car turns up and the guy says, hey, do you know what, I don't take dogs, and that's it, and drives off. Good luck getting another car, because it's that time of night. And you know, in Uber's case, they can actually, and it has happened, where people have been rated down as a result of having a guide dog. So, you know, you'll get in, and maybe they do allow the guy or girl into the car with the dog, but then when they get to their destination, when it comes to that rating, the Uber driver will rate you down and give you a 1-star rating, so that other people will almost be a little bit hesitant to choose you, to pick you up. And I think there's a lot of discrimination going on in that area. This does get reduced considerably, if not entirely wiped out, when you bring autonomy into it and you bring autonomous vehicles into it. Because like you say, cars themselves aren't usually scared of dogs. So they're not going to smell a dog and run away or drive away. At least we hope. But, you know, again, this is about services being developed. We know that the likelihood is that we're going to start to see these vehicles roll out in two fashions. One as a taxi option, as a subscription service potentially, but also as buses, as trucks as well, potentially, you know, ferrying around all our goods and services. And, you know, when you take the human element out, you take all the emotion out as well, and it makes a safer experience on the roads. And let's be honest, that's why autonomous vehicles are likely to come in, because they will reduce the horrific number of road deaths that are across the world. And that's something we need to applaud, right? That's what we want. But equally, it makes it a more accessible time for all of us, and more equitable, I think, as well, which is key.
Steven, so let me bring this back to the beginning and talk about the fact that, okay, great, cars are getting more accessible, the infotainment's getting more exciting. So when we talk about vehicles, how do you actually review them from the point of view of accessibility and visual impairment? Well, we've got someone lined up who's, I think, a pretty inspirational story, right?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I tend to use the word inspirational, you know, on as few occasions as possible, but this guy kind of gets into that. I think if there's anyone who deserves it, it's this guy. We're going to be hearing from a man who goes by the name of Julio Supercharge, which is just a fantastic name. I will say that's not his real name, in case you're in any doubt. That's not his real name. But we are going to be speaking to Julius Bura from Nairobi in Kenya. He's coming up next on Double Tap TV to tell us how he reviews cars as a blind guy.
You're watching Double Tap TV. Get involved. Follow us at Double Tap On Air or email us feedback@doubletaponair.com. Double Tap TV will be right back. You're watching Double Tap TV.
We're back on Double Tap TV talking a little bit about autonomous vehicles, but we're going to be talking about reviewing cars, and we've actually found the perfect angle to do it, Steven.
Yeah, that's probably a bit of an understatement, actually. Joining us this week is Julius Bura, also known as Julio Supercharge, born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. Julio, as we will call him for this episode, is a blind car reviewer. Yes, I will say that again, a blind car reviewer. But not only that, he's a lawyer by trade and advocates for disability in Kenya. Now, he got on my radar when I learned about him through YouTube. I saw his channel and I was alerted to it, and I was fascinated by the amount of videos he had created talking about cars and how he reviewed them. Julio, thank you so much for joining us here on Double Tap TV.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here. Really honored to actually feature on your show, and looking forward for a fruitful and very engaging conversation.
Start off by telling us a bit about yourself, because you weren't always blind, right?
I have seen before. I was born a sighted child. I don't like saying normal because it seems like persons with disabilities are abnormal. A few doctors checked me. They didn't see the problem, but one said I had a mental disability. So I was taken to a mental school. For persons who have mental issues. They actually told me that I have maculopathy, but again, after like a year and a half, but this is after like being taken to a school for blind and visually impaired, the eyesight started coming back, and this is because my body was fighting and there was cell regeneration. I had this sight for around 7 months, started going down again. So it was like a whole roller coaster of emotions.
Okay, I have to ask this question. I know Mark is probably wanting to ask it, but maybe he feels a bit nervous asking this question. So I'll ask it. What does a blind person get out of cars?
For me, it's all about touch and feel. touch and feel. So all the mental visuals that I consumed were low vision. I interpret that into tactile touch. Like on the cars, I'll touch the body panels, different contours, different body lines to distinguish the difference between, say, a Subaru and Mitsubishi Evo. And it's because I really had this passion. I still have it. It burns in me, and I really am curious about, say, the direction of Mazda in the next 5 years, where Mazda has come from, and why they position themselves to compete with the likes of Toyota and Honda. And that is what drives me to actually learn and go deeper into what does it take for a V6 engine to actually have a different note to a V8 engine, and what components are there, power output, what does it take for a turbocharge to actually bring out power, and compared to a naturally aspirated engine, what would be the difference? So it's the small things that people don't think about, because for me, if a car like passes and like I'm keen on listening, I'll tell you on what gear it is at or what speed it's traveling at. We're in a car. I'll tell you different corners of Nairobi because I know the whole layout by just orientation and approximations and all those elevations, gradient, all that.
Julio, I would never have pictured or thought that someone could take that much away from a vehicle just by the sound or the feel or the touch. Absolutely insane skill that you have there. I've got to ask you a question. When you do a new video, when you're with a new vehicle, what is it that you want the audience to take away from that video? What do you want them to leave that video feeling?
I'm aiming to show them that there is more to the world, and there is more to perceiving the world than just looking at things. There is more of appreciating, like the automotive industry, the cars, the machines, than just what you look at. And you don't judge, cars or people by just what you look at. There is more to it. It needs to strike a feeling inside you. Even when you're going to buy a car, you don't just buy because of convenience. You can have, you can have convenience because you have like this range of money that you're willing to spend, or whatever you can afford. But also in that amount of money, you can get so many options. And those options, you make decisions following your heart. So just don't use the physical side. You use the inner vision. And that is what normally I use. So I make people appreciate cars from a totally different world, and to make them understand that disability is not a limitation. It does not limit me in any way, and pushing boundaries is all I'm about, putting myself out of the comfort zone to, learn the next big thing, and to improve myself.
Julio, we need to take a quick break, but I want to bring something up about your actual main profession. You don't only just review cars on YouTube, and that is being a lawyer, and of course, autonomous vehicles. Well, we're going to get to a lot, so stick around. We'll be right back here on Double Tap TV.
Can't get enough Double Tap TV? Subscribe to the podcast and get your fill of Double Tap every day. Visit doubletaponair.com and follow us now. Double Tap TV will be right back. You're watching Double Tap TV.
We're back on Double Tap TV with Julius Bura, known on YouTube as Julio Supercharge, a blind car reviewer. Now, Julio, you're also a lawyer, so I guess that comes in handy when you're actually driving those cars, when you might get yourself into some fender benders.
So it hasn't happened yet. The lawyering side, I use it for my daily work. The organization I work for, I'm the head of legal department and also advocacy. So I also mentor kids in schools. We have computer labs in different schools. We're in 6 schools now for the blind. And we set up the labs to just teach them how to use technology.
Now, getting to a place where blind people could potentially be buying cars, how do you feel about that from your perspective?
I feel like it is an equalizer, first thing, because it actually gives people who even are low vision, people who have sight problems, to actually have a bit of help, assistance to navigate. And this I can't take for granted because, say, 20 years ago, we couldn't be talking about, autonomy of cars and driverless cars. Now, I know the next big thing is cars going electric, fully electric, but I feel like after that, the next big thing will be driverless cars, because if you look at even the way the mapping is done for navigation, even the Google Map itself, they are really advancing on the georeferencing to make sure that at any given point, you get real-time information on what are you supposed to do on the next turn or the next stop or the next bump, like that. So it will take a bit of time because even the infrastructure in Kenya or Africa, it's not as advanced, but I feel strongly that when we get there, oh my God, it will be revolutionary. I don't need to employ a driver to take me around. I can actually put coordinates of where I'm going and the car will drive itself there.
There's a good point you raised there about infrastructure, because even in developed countries, the infrastructure still isn't right. So in Kenya, how far along are you guys when it comes to infrastructure? I know cities are covered, but countrysides and other areas?
When you're in towns, like the urban areas, it's really good, even for the broadband and also internet connectivity, different apps. For me, I use 5 different apps to navigate, especially when I'm going for hikes, outdoor activities. And this becomes a problem when you start going into the country because, first of all, network is a problem, and also the exposure that hasn't gotten there yet, because people in the up country will be more concerned with what they'll eat or how they'll fend for their cattle, their livestock, rather than looking for expensive tech. So especially, I normally tell people, for a person with disability, for you to be at par with the society, it's very expensive. Because for me to be on the same level with someone who's sighted, I need 5 different devices. I need a laptop with a screen reader, for me to access something that they would access actually on their phones. I need a phone that has good screen reader accessibility features. That for them, it's a non-issue because they can get a very low-cost phone and actually do everything that you need to do with a phone.
Julio, I think some people would think, and naively so, that all of Africa is a third world country, which really is the farthest from the truth. But perception sometimes is very different. What is it like to live with a disability in Nairobi?
So I would say, especially for a person with a disability, any kind of a disability, there are struggles of trying to fight for our position in the society, but also there has been progress, a lot of it, the past, I would say 10 years. And it's because also the society is embracing disability inclusion. For instance, where I'm working, I work for a non-profit organization called Enable. We are both in Washington, D.C. and Kenya, but we serve the whole of Africa. We have a conference coming up in May 30th and 31st, and it's a global conference, and we empower blind and visually impaired through assistive technology. But we're trying to branch out to the other disability communities. So the conference especially looks at the disability world as a whole. So I would say such organizations and also the government taking steps to ensure that the rights of persons with disabilities are taken care of. It is also proving that there is equality and there are people who are vouching for persons with disabilities.
Julio, you are a super interesting guy. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Double Tap TV.
Steven, I really, all I could say after having a conversation with him is just wow. Absolutely wow. What an incredible individual and an incredible story. And you've been to Africa, right? Have you been to Nairobi?
Not to Nairobi. I spent time in Ghana and I met some incredible people. And one thing I'll say about my experience there is when you return from a place like Africa, you often think to yourself, what problems do I really have at home? Now, that's not to deny problems that exist for people in other countries or outside of Africa, but it does show that there's a lot of work to be done. And Julius's story really tells a tale, and he goes into so much more depth in our conversation. Maybe we'll pull some more of that interview out on our podcast, because honestly there's so much he talked about in that conversation. About his life and his experiences, not just of his own experiences going blind, but his experiences and people's attitudes towards him. One, I won't go into the details here on this show because it would be slightly inappropriate, I guess, but there are some horror stories that come out from Africa about the treatment of blind people, and especially people, for example, who have albinism. There are terrible, terrible, tragic stories that come out of that. And, this is something which doesn't really get much of a spotlight at all. But the reality is that, people like, Julio is trying his best to pull himself up and get on with it. And he has such a positive attitude, which is key. It really is key. It's the only way to get through. I talk about it on my show all the time. I talk about personal responsibility, pulling yourself up. It's the only way to get there. You can't be a victim your whole life. And Julio is not a victim. He's not. He's someone who takes life by the reins, and sometimes even by the steering wheel, which is actually pretty terrifying.
Well, if you guys want to follow him, just go to YouTube and look up Julio Supercharge, and you can follow him right now. Thanks for being here. As always this week, we look forward to chatting with you again on our next episode of Double Tap TV.
Thanks for watching Double Tap. Send us your feedback to feedback@doubletaponair.com. Leave us a voicemail at 1-877-803-4567. Hosted by Marc Aflalo in Montreal and Stephen Scott in Glasgow. Producer Marc Aflalo. Editing and graphics Jordan Steves. Voiceover Anna Vicino. Social media Wendy Kaufman. Integrated Described Video Specialist M. Williams. Supervising Producer Michelle Dudas. Manager Programming AMI TV Lizanne Gagne. Director Content Development and Production Karen Nye. VP Content Development and Operations John Melville. President and CEO David Arrington. Copyright 2023 Accessible Media Inc.
An AMI original production.